Hi, have you Grange today and celebrated the Grange way of life? We've got some information and some inspiration for you. I'm Walter Boomsma, Communications Director for the Mainstay Grange, welcoming you to another Resources for Granges program. Welcome to another Grange Resources program in which we try to provide information and inspiration. I'm Walter Boomsma, Communications Director for the Mainstay Grange, and our topic today is Let's Keep Going. As we look at some of the resources that are available to Granges that are really, in some cases, struggling to try to keep going. And we're very fortunate to have with us today Amanda Brozana Rio, who is the Communications Director for National Grange. Amanda, thanks for being here.
Walter, thank you so much. It's always good to catch up with you.
Yeah, we always have fun. Just as background, I know, and obviously you do too, National Grange released a guide to virtual meetings, I believe it was called, back in the spring. By the way, that's available on the Mainstay Grange website in the Program Books and Information, under the Program Books and Information tab. And that was what? Back in the spring. That's like 9 months ago.
Yeah.
A lot has changed. I think a lot of Granges, even back then in the spring, postponed facing the fact that they weren't able to meet. And what's happening now is, after the 9 months have gone by, they're beginning to look at what are some of our options, and potentially adopting some different techniques. What are you seeing around the country? How's that going in other places?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that happened initially, just like you said, a lot of Granges said, okay, this is a month or two. We'll be back to normal. It'll be fine. And there were a few, mainly Granges, that either had already previously adopted some of the technology into their meetings because they were using some type of software, some type of phone or video conference to allow members at a distance to participate as per the ruling that allowed them to do so in 2016 from the national president, Betsy Huber, or they were, in some way doing meetings occasionally in that form anyway. So those were like our early adopters. And they had kind of a seamless transition, but also the expectation it was going to go back to normal soon. And then we had some folks who got through the first month or two and realized there's stuff I have to do. We have a fair that's going to be coming up, and of course it's not going to be canceled. Or we have a dictionary project, that kicks off in September every year, and so we're going to be planning for this. And so they did a little bit later of an adoption. Some of the state Granges had already picked up paid plans of things like Zoom, some of the software to use to do some of these meetings. We had offered, and we still do offer, the National Grange platform for local Granges to have meetings. And so there was that kind of mid-level of adoption. And then we had some folks who were finding other ways, maybe not through the technology. Maybe they are in places where rural broadband and even cell service is just really not available. And so they were finding other ways. They were finding the old phone tree. I mean, I think about my parents and the PTA stuff in the 1980s. There was a phone tree. You called somebody, or somebody called you, and you called two people, and things got done. And they were finding ways to do that. And finding ways to, connect people in the Grange to maybe continue progress. And then we had the fourth group. And unfortunately, the fourth group is a little larger than any of us would like to talk about, of people who said, we'll wait this out. And I don't think they meant to wait it out for going on 11 months now. But for one reason or another, the waiting it out has just remained. And so they haven't met. And those are the ones that are scariest, I think, just in general, for a state Grange person, for just a Granger that loves the organization, because when this all started happening and National President Betsy Huber had said, we've got to make sure they're still doing Grange because they could get out of the habit. I thought, that's silly. That's a silly way to put it. Yeah. But it's true. Yeah. It is easy to repurpose the time you were Granging, and figure out whether or not you really feel like you need to have people in your life that you were seeing at Grange, and determining whether or not your Grange was relevant, or if you could put that time and effort into some other organization that you're finding more relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's good and bad to that. It means that some of our Granges are realizing where they're challenged, and where they can make changes to their structure that could be beneficial long term. But of course, there's other Granges who are realizing they really don't have the relevance that they used to,
Mm-hmm.
and they may be ones that don't survive this. We always talk about whether or not that's good or bad. I mean, losing a Grange anytime is bad, right? But it also
Almost.
strengthens, yeah, it also can strengthen the organization as a whole. If folks who are really committed end up going to other Granges nearby, or restarting a Grange that's really active or whatever, and you're not kind of carrying that. So it's just been interesting, as a person inside looking in, but also sometimes just taking that step back and outside looking in. There is nothing that any of us could have done to prepare for this, but boy, did we at least have the timing of that ruling right, that you could have meetings and you could do your activities and things like that with some more of these unique or new methods. So
Yeah, we could do a whole program on that, I think. I've said a sociologist should be having a field day right now, and particularly where almost every institution in the country, in the world, really, it has just had this dramatic impact, and truly nobody was prepared for it. It's interesting because everything you said, I'm sitting here going, because I've said, what's worse than a Grange not meeting or not being active, if you will, is that nobody misses them. I mean, that goes to that relevance issue. And I think you're absolutely right. And I've seen a little of it here in Maine. Is why are we meeting? And some Granges, it seems like they got together, however often, to do the ritual. Yeah. Which and I love the ritual. I'm not making fun of the ritual, but that's not enough to keep you going when you're in a situation like we're in right now. So yeah, I think, and I love, I can't remember the numbers of how you numbered people, but because it became a problem for some Granges, because holy cow, how are we going to keep doing the things that we do if we're not meeting? And it was like form following function, function following form. We got to find a way to make this happen, even if we're not comfortable with it. So yeah, it's and I think it's. This is just Walter's personal opinion, but I don't think we're out of the woods, even close to being out of the woods yet. So I think it's going to be even more interesting to see what happens as time unfolds. I mean, do we end up with a lean, mean Grange? We've got to, at some level, be able to adapt and adopt to some of these changes. I know Valley Grange, we suffered that because we had, like, our dictionary project. I mean, we were that normally would take place in October, and typically 2 of the schools that we work with come to the Grange Hall. They make a field trip to the Grange Hall, and then we personally visit every other school. And do like a 45-minute presentation. Well, none of that was an option. So we got a little bit creative, and it's kind of good news, bad news, because it meant we actually had to adopt technology, because the only way I could present to the kids was to do it virtually, kind of like what you and I are doing now. So there's always good news in all of this stuff. It's been, at an academic level, I think it's been interesting to watch this unfold. I love the fact that you were describing how different Granges have used different approaches, and some have found their own. So do you, in seeing that kind of nationwide overview, do you have some favorite options that Granges might consider adopting to kind of keep going? That's the theme of our program.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I'm glad we mentioned the handbook that came out with some of the basic options and, photos of how to set up some of those meetings and whatever, use some of the platforms. Most people adopted Zoom because it was already a really prevalent option, and people were familiar with it, and it's become the word of the year in some ways. I'm Zooming with,
It's
I
a
have a
noun
Zoom
and a verb.
everything. It's it was a really easy one to adopt initially, and of course they immediately made their platform really available for free users. But since then they've kind of pulled back a little, and we're in the process of updating that document about the how to hold virtual meetings, because one thing that you and I've talked about is they now don't allow phone calls into the free meetings. So you have to have a paid plan, which they're only $100 and some a year, but some Granges are not going to spend that on their own. And their state Grange hasn't invested yet. So my personal favorite actually is a thing called freeconferencecall.com. In the name, you can tell it's free and it allows you to do conference calls. What it doesn't tell you, unless you are assuming by the .com part of that, is that it's almost exactly like Zoom in a lot of ways, in that we can be having this face-to-face video meeting, and you can have call-in participants. We did this just last night with the committee that's working on planning Grange Revival 2021. We had one call-in participant. We had 4 of us on the video conference, and it allowed us all of the basically same options. We could record the meeting if we needed to. We could chat with one another. We could go into breakout rooms if 2 of us wanted to talk about activities and 3 of them wanted to talk about food, for example. So we could have that all going at the same time. And that's really useful, I think, to me, because that hasn't changed as much over the course of time. What they've actually really adopted some extra features, and it's free, like it says. But also, I mean, I would say that one of the things that we've learned is having the meeting. It's great, but it's something that we should talk about for our real meetings too. Not everything needs to be done in the meeting, right? So sometimes you need to be figuring out when you can have the next meeting or when you want to do a service project or whatever. And so you might want to use something like a doodle poll, or you talked about a Microsoft form or a Jot form, something where you're taking people's temperature. You're getting everybody to fill out a quick survey or form of some sort. You don't need to spend 20 minutes in your meeting, whether it's by Zoom, free conference call, or in your actual hall, to discuss whether or not, you'd like to have this meeting at 7 o'clock or 7:30, or you'd like to spend, have, $5 admission versus $3 admission for your event. I mean, there are things that we certainly almost over micromanage sometimes, that take a lot of time and make meetings less attractive, especially to new folks, our younger folks. So I think some of the technology that we're able to learn and adopt doing this has been really great. The last part is we've got a lot of Granges, especially recently, talk about what do we do? We always have a dues paying dinner. We always, bring everybody together. We feed them and they give us their money for the year in January or February. And now we're not doing that. And how are we going to continue? And so, I am the not checkbook generation. I have a debit card and I use online payments, and that's not unusual. And so, obviously offering that people can send you your check, that's great, but opening up variety of options for payments is also something that would be really good. You can track and prove payments just as easily or easier if you use things like PayPal or Venmo or Cash App or whatever. And Joe Stefanoni, our membership director, has actually put out a guide on that as well. So, those are important changes that I think kind of were coming for a while. We have just greased the skids.
Yeah, and you're right. And I've said that potentially one of the good part of the good news about what has happened with the pandemic is it's kind of forcing us to do things that we probably should have been doing anyway, and may have been, but we're having to do it at a little bit of a faster pace. And that can be challenging. I mean, I know I've had subordinate Grange secretaries say, gee whiz, can't, the younger ones typically, not to be age discriminatory, but are saying, you know, why can't we manage the membership list online? Why do I have to send in all these written reports and so on? And I think eventually we're going to be moving in that direction, but change very often and with some, yeah, in some sense it's good. It happens kind of slowly. Now, coming back to the Zoom thing, I probably have some advantage and maybe even some biases because I use Zoom as a teaching and meeting tool outside the Grange. The good news, I would say, is they have an excellent help and tutorial system, but
they do.
Any of these things, there's a learning curve involved. And it was interesting when you were talking about, you know, what do we need to talk about at the meeting? One of the committees I belong to is truly really struggling with that because what they're finding is it would be really easy to have these really long meetings because everybody has to have a turn, so to speak, and you know, one of our committee members, I love this expression. She said, if I can remember it now, she said it went into this. There was a decision that didn't get made. She said it went into Zoom land or something like that. Yeah, you know, it just kind of disappears off into the. So and I really truly hadn't thought about this till today as we're talking. Is that and we would do well in our regular meetings, as you said, to figure out what is the most efficient way for us to accomplish what we need to accomplish in a meeting. You know, and I like time limits on meetings because you can go on forever. But coming back to the Zoom thing and the learning curves and some of these new programs, and by the way, for our watchers and listeners, what we're going to do at the end of the video is list the resources, the URLs of things like this free conference call program and the doodle poll and so on. But another question for you, Amanda, is and I understand National Grange, we all have limited resources and limited people and time. You know, the Maine State Grange Communications Department, welcome to our big studio, by the way.
One person national department, right?
Yeah, that guy sitting behind me, he never does anything. It's like, gee whiz, you know, can you help me out here? What are some of the things, realistically, what are some of the things National Grange might be able to help a local Grange with if they wanted to investigate either meeting in a different way or meeting more efficiently and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you that when this first started, we opened up our Zoom account so that local Granges or state Granges could ask, hey, is there availability at 7 o'clock on Monday for me to hold a meeting? We are still doing that for some Granges who, you know, haven't invested on their own. So if you're a small Grange that wants to try it out, or a Grange that doesn't have a lot of resources, Stephanie Wilkins, who's our IT director at information@nationalgrange.org, is the one to contact, and she keeps that schedule. And so, you know, that's one of the first things is we do allow it for free. We have several states, Washington, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, you know, a multitude of states that have bought their own subscription, Kansas, I believe, that, you know, you can call your state Grange and say, hey, do you have a subscription? Can we use it? And obviously you can buy your own. The second thing is, you know, just having the access. And again, that's talking about the Zoom platform. That's ignoring the fact that you could do this for free on free conference call, which I, again, recommend. But just knowing that you have the access is not knowing that you can do it. And obviously, I think we all get to that point. I'm pushing on 40, Walter, and I got to tell you, like, I now understand why my grandmother was like afraid that she was going to break something with, you know, turning on the DVD or the VHS, you know, player and trying to record something.
Yeah. Let's not talk about age.
It's true though. Like I'm now understanding how you can get a little bit scared of technology, you know, or at least reticent. And obviously my job, I kind of have to push past that, but I can see where folks who are just not in doing technology on a regular basis are saying, well, great, thanks for giving me the platform, but I don't know how to use it and I want to break it. So we have been really fortunate. Our other staff members, younger staff members, have stepped up. Our junior director, Samantha Wilkins, our youth director, Mandy Bostwick, Joe Stefanoni, our membership director, myself, we've all said, we're happy to kind of walk people through some of this, as well as Stephanie, so that she didn't get overwhelmed. We were super fortunate this summer because of the fact that rural America was on fire, and like we were dealing with everything. I mean, USPS, healthcare system that was already, in challenges, all of these things, all the farm issues that were happening, the food issues, the supply chain issues. Oh my God. We were commenting and writing about everything all the time. So we were fortunate that National Grange invested in getting 2 interns who have stuck with us. One of which has been doing a lot of legislative stuff. That's Sean and Neil. But the other one, Kennedy Gwynn, has been doing legislative and communications and really member services, because she is a lifetime member of Washington State Grange. She grew up in Grange, and that's hugely helpful because she has the language and the understanding of what she's dealing with. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to have 4 more interns, mostly working on legislative priority stuff. But again, they're all young. They've all Zoomed their heart out this past, year on their college courses and things. They could do in their sleep. And so we're fortunate because we are able to say to a Grange, if you haven't done this yet, and it's time, but you're scared, let us help you figure out how to set this up, which program is the best, how to send out the invitation. Even several of us have sat in on meetings, not to provide any type of oversight, but in the event that somebody says, how do I do this? Or, I'm struggling to get my microphone working or whatever. We've been able to work through that. We did that even with school sessions last year. And so that's been a really nice thing, because I think we're able to show that, we really care to be in touch with what local Granges need and are doing. But that's something that is available. And I don't know that we normally would have tried to make sure we were doing all that, not because we didn't want to, but just sometimes don't realize, how beneficial that can be.
Well, yeah, and the more familiar you become with something, the harder it is to understand that other people aren't familiar with it. And frankly, one of the reasons I asked you to join us today is you see a much bigger picture than even I do. I mean, I tend to see what's going on to some extent around the whole state of Maine, but I have a limited knowledge of what's going on in other places. You mentioned inviting people to meetings, and that's kind of been a hot button for me, particularly with the Zoom thing. I was on Facebook and I saw an open invitation to a meeting with the meeting ID and the password and everything, and the person who did it, their heart was probably in the right place. We want as many people to come as possible. And what's the hazard of doing that? And what are the alternatives?
Right. So I think that you and I have talked, but maybe some other people don't know. There were instances as Zoom culture became a thing a couple months into, or a few weeks into the pandemic, where especially the schools that were going online with their classes were getting what's called Zoom bombed. And it was people getting on and then sharing their screen with pornography or just opening their microphone and having really loud sirens or other, distracting noises, to the point where you couldn't function in that space you had just created. It would be like somebody coming into your Grange hall with a megaphone and just shouting every time somebody wanted to speak. You at some point decide to walk away. So, we did warn folks that having a password on your meeting was a really good idea. And then obviously not sharing that password with just, everyone in the world. What we figured out is a couple things. So yes, invite your community. But just like you would RSVP for a dinner because you don't want to have too many people in your hall or something like that, invite them and say, here's, the information for the meeting, contact so-and-so to get the link or the phone number and passcode or whatever. It gives you a little bit more control of who's there. And that's not to say don't invite your whole community, but it is to say hopefully none of your community members are going to come in and do any of those lewd or obnoxious things. The other part, you know, for this, that's really interesting, I think, to me, when you're looking at what's going on around the country, is we've had a lot of people who have opened up their events to other Granges so that they're being models, because it's really easy to get stagnant in you know, you read the same poem every February and you have the same type of program every June. So it's allowing people to get a lot of different looks at what Granges look like, what they do, what they're focused on, what's exciting for people. So they have ideas. And it also has really opened up the ability for people who may not be comfortable walking into halls with a bunch of people that they don't know, or worse yet, since some of our Granges meet in people's homes. I'm sorry, I'm a young female. I am not comfortable oftentimes just walking into a bunch of strangers in a home setting, even if I think that they're wonderful people. It just feels a little odd.
Sure.
So it's opened up the ability for us to really reach out and invite people in because they're comfortable in their home. So if they get uncomfortable with what you're talking about, they just log off. They don't have to like have the confrontation or anything like that. People are much more willing to come to our meetings when they're on Zoom in some cases that we've heard. And if you would be in a rural area, it might take you 30 or 40 minutes to drive to a Grange in order to give a 10-minute presentation about the new local recycling program and then drive home. And do you want to leave your kids to go talk to 15 people and like you've already had a long day and nobody wants to put up with all of that? And granted, you want people to, you know, do recycling, but that's only like half of your job in this rural community. It was hard to get some of speakers. It was hard to get some of these, you know, really good lectures program information in front of people. It's not that hard now because everybody's so used to doing this. So giving them a link and saying, here you go, come on in, be here at 7. If you want to come at 6:30, we're all just going to be chatting about what we can do good in the community. But at 7, your time of the program is. We've seen a lot of Granges have a lot of success with getting people that they could never normally get to come speak, state representatives, you know, Department of Ag workers, local professors. I mean, the amount of the breadth of the way that our Granges are able to offer different programming now, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. And I could spend a lot of time, but just quickly, I think the word I like, different, you know, it's like I said, Zoom is both a noun and a verb now. I mean, the technology forces us to change our language. One of the words that's being used a lot is pivot. It's become necessary for something you always did in a very traditional way. You may have to pivot that. There was a great story about an Amish farmer in Pennsylvania who had built this incredible business. And I'd love to tell the whole story because it really is fascinating, because they're not technology people, right? But he managed to build this whole business of supplying cheese primarily to restaurants. Very successful business. And then the pandemic hits. And we don't want to talk for a long time about what happened to the restaurant business, but boom, obviously. So here's this Amish guy who he probably doesn't even know what Zoom is, who, to his credit, said, gee whiz, you know, I mean, I don't know his exact words. I can't speak Pennsylvania Dutch, but he said, gee whiz, I got to do something different. So he went out and found somebody who was technologically oriented, and he pivoted. He made his business into an online business. And somebody runs it for him, obviously, while he's sitting by his propane lamp. And he has been wildly successful. And then I watched one of our Granges. In fact, it was the subject of our last Grange resources for Granges program, Highland Lake Grange here in Maine. They had been doing a turkey supper, sit-down turkey supper as one of their major fundraisers. And they would get typically 80 to 100 people. So here comes the pandemic. They really can't do the sit down supper anymore. And I wish I had time to really tell all the detail, but they decided we got to do something different. They pivoted and they went to a take home, a pickup kind of thing.
Right.
And it's really kind of a fun story because they got the Boy Scouts involved and everything else. Well, the first time they did it, remember, they got 80 to 100 people at their regular sit down dinners. They got 150 people. I mean, they just about doubled their attendance. The only reason that it ended at 150 is they ran out of food.
Yeah.
The next time they did one, you ready for this? They served 200 people. I think it was just about 200 people. Gee whiz, thank God we have the pandemic because we've discovered a whole new way of doing things. Certainly I'm not enjoying a lot of things about the pandemic, but isn't it so true that you do have to kind of pivot, think outside the box and figure out how you're going to do things differently. I think we got to find more of those stories.
I think that the one thing that, it's also shown us is I may want to pick up my food and go home and spend time getting the kids, the homework done and, Molly off to dance and Jake off to baseball and whatever. I may not have time for those sit down dinners.
Yep.
But we are already such a fractured society. I mean, I think if there is no better proof than this past couple weeks of why we need those times and ways to get people together in the same room, just talking and seeing each other as humans. We need that still.
Yeah.
And so, we also have to find ways that we're saying these are great fundraisers and don't stop doing this new drive-through version, right? But how do we now accomplish the next step, which is we've gotten our drive-through food to you. We've put a flyer in and we've invited you to come and have a community discussion about something kind of innocuous so that you can enjoy each other's company again, even though I might be blue and you might be team red or team green or team yellow or whatever, we seem to be doing with ourselves here. Because I think we're also realizing what our place needs to be, not just is, but needs to be. I mean, because we're started to heal a fractured nation, and we have got to be one of the groups that helps do that again.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the questions I asked the folks from Highland Lake is, so you're going to go back to sit down dinners if you could, because maybe you don't. I mean, maybe maybe you really learned something. And you had mentioned the advantages in terms of programming or getting guest speakers. Again, I know not every Grange has the technical capability to do this, but truly, if we went back to normal and had an in-person Grange meeting, you could attend that meeting. I mean, for the lecturers program, we could set up a projector. Again, I'm assuming that I happen to have that technology, but we could set up a projector and you wouldn't have to drive all the way to Maine or fly all the way to Maine. You could literally just pop in for 15 minutes and then pop out.
Well, the other thing we've learned is I can get on one of these by myself. I can get on it by myself and I can record it. And now I can send you the recording.
Yep.
And we know none of us thought we had that technology a year ago, but all of a sudden we're realizing. And so if your Grange doesn't have Wi-Fi in your building, but you have the ability to provide this lectures program, either on a screen or maybe you just provide the file and send it to your folks and you have them watch it beforehand. And when they come to the Grange, they talk about, what they saw, almost like a book club. It gives us so many more opportunities.
Yeah.
And using our different things, you can use your email list, you can use your website, you can become a community hub and resource because you've interviewed the local recycling coordinator and you've interviewed the local teacher of the year and whatever. And now if I want to see something more in depth about my community, I'm going to go to that community Grange's website because I bet you they've interviewed them. And if they haven't, I bet I can tell them to.
Yeah.
But again, we can provide things. You could provide. I could ask you, hey, can you please talk a little bit about how doing these video lessons has been successful in Maine, and I could send that out to somebody in Wyoming who's looking for that information. So the other part of this is we have figured out a lot of ways to provide a lot of resources. And now it's figuring out how to almost syndicate those resources across our network, because our lecturers are doing amazing things, but sometimes they don't have somebody in their backyard. Well, right. They're getting stuck, or they don't have somebody in their backyard who can explain something in a way that they want. And if they have quality resources available to them, it makes Grange more attractive.
Absolutely.
It makes Grange more attractive for current members, and it makes it more attractive for future members.
Yeah, and one of the, I mentioned the dictionary project. That was one of the things that I did with the dictionary project is I recorded a mini presentation. It wasn't the full 45 minutes, and uploaded it to well, I put it on YouTube, and I made that available to all the teachers. I can't talk to your kids. Oh yes, I can. It will be a little bit impersonal, and it was really interesting to me. And I'm kind of maybe doing a little of this, but it was really interesting to me to get the feedback from the teachers, because what they were telling me was, the kids watched the video of me, and of course I built up the suspense a little bit, and they were so excited about the idea of getting their dictionaries, because of what I was doing was selling the fact that they were going to get their own dictionary. So I can see. So you had, when we were talking before the show, if you will, you had said, "Hey, did you ever picture yourself doing your own TV program?" and I have to say, well, no, not really. I mean, I did some radio work years ago, but if you had said to me, I don't know how long I've been communications director, webmaster, but it's probably at least 10 years. If you had said to me, even 5 years ago, if you had said to me that the Maine State Grange would have their own Zoom, YouTube channel, I'd have said, "You're nuts."
Right.
But now we do.
Right.
And that becomes accessible. I mean, truly, if somebody was interested in what Highland Lake Grange did, they could go to the Maine State Grange YouTube channel, and there's I think it's about 25, 30 minutes, 25, 30 minute, and people are doing that. I'm actually watching that happen. And they're saying, "Hey, that was helpful, because we need to do something like that." We need to take just a quick ID break here. I'm Walter Boomsma, Communications Director for the Maine State Grange, and I'm talking with Amanda Brozana Rio from National Grange. She's their Communications Director. So our communications function, communications department here in Maine, has introduced this program as part of an increased effort to provide resources, kind of what we've been talking about, but not just for virtual meetings. Our first program actually talked about the nonprofit aspect and the Maine Grange Foundation and how that works and how Granges might want to use that. The second one, actually, there's been three. The second one was about how to do the Words for Thirds project. And here we are, I think this is the fourth program. I'm open mic here, so to speak. What are some resources, not just necessarily specific to virtual meetings and things, available at National Grange that you'd like to promote?
So I'm actually really glad that you asked about that, because this past year we've been doing a lot of work with a lot of things that either we've had in the past that really just needed updates, or finding things that really were holes in our curriculum. Joe Stefanoni last February provided what's called well, it used to be the Builder Kit, and now it is a resource binder. And the reason he did it that way is so that as things change, they can be flipped out very easily. They don't, they're not in a printed hard book. Things can be added to it as we're learning how to do some things like Zoom or what have you. Key elements can be added to it. It's available as an actual, 3-ring binder, or it's available for download. The download is free. I love free. But if you don't go online and you want to just have it, you're probably not here listening to this, but you can purchase it through our Grange supply store. We have the communications handbook that I put out 9 or so years ago that has needed a desperate update. And it is now to the point where we're in that last stage of updating it. things changed so much this past year that about a year ago it was supposed to be out with an update, and it just felt like it was the wrong timing. So we have the communications handbook, and that is also in the 3-ring binder, version, and it kind of goes through how to set up everything from a YouTube channel or a Facebook page to how to talk to media and how to prepare for an interview and things like that. We have a book that Betsy had updated last year, and that's a leader book, and it also looks at the roles of different officers or directors in a Grange. And I think that's useful for a lot of reasons. And part of it is because it kind of reminds you of the charges that we've all heard over and over and over when people get installed, but you forget. You get really boxed in because our last lecturer used to always do this, and the lecturer before that did this, and I've always done this. So I forget that maybe a lectures program is not reading a poem or having an outside speaker, but it can also be, teaching a craft or fill in the blank. So, I really like that book as well. But the last thing is, we've done a lot with our social media to promote different things that Granges are doing. And I think, to me, the one biggest discouraging thing in my job every day is how much information we put out and how little is used.
Yeah.
Not to say that our information is perfect or always relevant,
right.
But it's sad to me when, like, the current national lecturer gets a quilt block entry from 2 years ago because no one has let the people know that there's a new contest this year. So somebody's taken their time and their money and their effort and done something that is no longer relevant. Or when Loretta says somebody sent us a sheet from the 1990s ordering a 50-year certificate, and I had to tell them, hey, I can send you this certificate, but you still owe us $6 extra because, things have increased. And it's really hard, I think, for me, when we put out a lot of information, whether it's about something like, hey, this resource is available, to, hey, this is an issue, a priority issue, and we'd really love to have your input or your stories so that we can be more effective advocates for you. And nobody knows about it. And we have a very small mailing list. We have, a small number of people comparably to our full membership who like our social media pages. Those lists almost overlap completely.
Yeah.
So, for a 150,000 person organization, we're only directly kind of tapping or touching or have the ability to directly tap or touch about 8,000 or so of them.
Oh.
And when you look at our statistics of how many people actually open their email when it's sent from us, and that I can't quite see how many people are like scrolling past stuff on our social media, but I can see engagement. We're really only touching a very, 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 very small number, 1% or 2% of our membership. So that means there are people out there who are banging their heads against the wall, or they're doing things that take their time and effort and burning themselves out when maybe there's a better way, or maybe they have a better way that they haven't told us to get out to people, and so I would just say there's a ton of resources, Walter. This is a resource. All these things that we're creating.
Well, and I can maybe make you, I hate to say that I'm kind of happy to hear what you're saying in one respect, because we here in Maine, we have, we're like a microcosm of what's happened nationally. We're having the same issue. When I became communications director, I said that, publicity is important, the media is important, and so on. But I think we really need to focus on our internal communication. And again, this Resources for Granges program is one of the efforts to do that, and it hopefully it starts to address these communication gaps. But here's the good news for you. Patrons change, right? when back, I can't tell you exactly, but more than a few months ago, I managed to develop the technology to post the actual newsletter on the website, and it turned into a kind of, not really a disaster, but a mess. Some people could read it, some people couldn't. So I actually did a really like a 1 or 2 question survey, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but people said, well, yeah, let's keep it going, but maybe you don't have to post it. Maybe you just give us a link to it. So what I've done since then is I have, every time there's a patron's chain that comes out, is I write just a really quick summary of the articles that are in it. And there's a link that they can click. And you know what? I'm surprised that a lot of people are doing that. Frankly, it just amazed me that there was that much interest here in Maine about what's going on at National Grange, because we've always been sort of xenophobic and insulated. So good news. I mean, I think there are some positive signs coming, and one of my plans, you'll be back, whether or not you know it yet, because one of my plans is to kind of try to address some of that. I have some thoughts about doing a program on the digest. I'm amazed at how many Granges don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
So we've got some stuff coming, and we're kind of running out of time. And you know me well enough to know that I can't resist, because this is about the time of year when I start nagging you. Grange month is coming up in April traditionally. Any inside track on that? Any thoughts about
Yeah.
it?
So cultivating connections,
Okay.
which was our theme last year, remains our theme this year. We not only was it pretty well adopted, and it's generalized enough that Granges can really make it their own, based on what they do well. But also, if you want to talk about what we need right now, is connecting people.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense to keep that on for another year. So that same icon will be there, the same logo and everything like that. And we're going to be just asking people how they indeed tried to foster connections, cultivate connections, and in what ways. So the one thing I will say is I think that you're going to see a kind of renewed interest in this effort to bring people together and facilitate community conversations and that human to human review of our state of the world, with that nonpartisan bent. And so we'll be looking a lot at those. So if you have ideas, or if you have a program, or if you have, some success story on that as a Grange, we'll be looking for those.
Cool.
So that's the Grange month stuff. We also are really encouraging folks to do those community hero awards, which has always been part of Grange month. It's something that you can order from the Grange supply store. You can even order a 7-sided plaque and get it engraved with the information, or just like a little paperweight or whatever, because there are so many people. I mean, look at every community. You can point to somebody this year who has done something heroic. Maybe it's the fabric shop owner who literally just gave bolts of fabric away to some of the people that they knew would sew, because those people would sew those masks and put them out for free. I saw some of them putting them out for free on little trees or shrubs in their community, so people who didn't have masks could go and do that. I mean, that's a hero. That is someone who made sure that their community was going to be protected and safe, regardless of finances, and took a financial hit to their business to do it. And I think there's tons of those examples all over the country. So we really, really are encouraging that. Part of that cultivating connections is also part of the recognition of the people who are heroes in our communities. So yeah, Community Citizen Award is a big thing for us for this year. And then the last thing is, last year we had Cultivating Connections, the video program like this. We'll be restarting that soon. And so every day in April, we'll be having a program of some sort. I'm not sure what all of them are yet, because we're just getting that kind of underway. But we'll be doing those live. And so it'll be exciting to reconnect with people now that I'm in a more stable, tech environment and stuff like that, and can do those. We're going to be inviting all kinds of folks on to talk with us about different things. So
Interesting.
that's our Grange month.
I'm glad to hear that we're just not letting it go, so to speak. I mean, last year we ended up, because it happened, it was just horrible timing in so many different ways. We ended up just kind of like skipping it. And I think that was true of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But I think we do need to look at, because what we always did at Valley Grange, we always had a community night. And it involved, we still are calling it the Community Citizen Award, Community Hero, Community Citizen Award. And people just love that. I don't know that I am actually fairly confident we're not going to be able to do that this year, not an in-person kind of thing. So again, going back to the pivoting thing, one of the things is, how do we, orchestrate some kind of a celebration of that community hero, community citizen, or citizens? We've given that award to organizations in the past. Yeah. The TV station, 1 year, the TV station and the local newspaper were community citizens. Again, we did it in a very traditional way. So I'm kind of got ready to put my creative hat on and say, how are we going to accomplish that?
I would just like to say that if you're going to do that Community Citizen Award this year, again, just because people are looking for those good positive stories, and with the pandemic being such a thing in everyone's lives, the media is covering this. So this is one of those few years that I can say, if you name somebody a community citizen and you give your local newspaper or your local TV or whatever information ahead of time, and you give them the link to the Zoom or the free conference call or whatever, where you're holding this, where you're announcing who your winner is, and maybe allowing your winner from afar to virtually accept their award and what have you, and talk a little bit about themselves or about their efforts, you will get coverage and you will be relevant. And so, find a way to do that this year, because it is important for us to continue to show that we're relevant in these communities.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I've always said, one of my kind of favorite publicity, whatever sayings is, it's a whole lot easier to make news than it is to write press releases. And for Valley, media attention's not historically been a problem, but it has been a problem this year because the nature of the news has changed, and we don't always kind of know until the last minute what we're going to do. So I actually have been thinking about talking to some of our local media folks about doing sort of a feature story on how the Grange or Granges are coping, very similar to what you and I are talking about. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and so I get we probably
is anybody who's doing the dictionary project this year, I think we're seeing exactly why dictionaries are still important. So any of the Granges that are doing dictionary project might find a really great story that their local newspaper or TV station or something could cover or write about. Kids are getting turned out on technology, and sometimes they'd like to just go to a physical book, or the kids that don't have the stable technology are using these still, or whatever. I mean, that
I mean,
find what you're doing that can get you attention.
That's another one of Walter's Mr. Boomsma's deals, and it's so fun, and I do think it's a story that, and even more so now, because I worry about our kids. I really do, because I mean, from what I've seen, they're doing great. They're wearing masks at school, not a problem, and so on. But I don't know what's going on in here. And I don't know what's going on in here. I do know that some of these kids, are, particularly the older kids, the high school, maybe junior high school kids, are really suffering from this social distancing. I would love to change the language. I think we ought to talk about physical distancing, not social distancing, because I think you can be socially close even if you're physically distant. Hey, there's another program we ought to do.
And Granges can facilitate that.
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
mention one last thing, Walter, and that is, that January is mentoring month.
Yes, I just realized that, unfortunately, and we're already almost halfway through the month.
But I just think it's really it's good to note, because one of the biggest things that Grange can do is be mentors and be supporters
Mhm.
and cheerleaders. You know, those local kids that you're talking about, you know, they are desperate for somebody other than mom and dad to appreciate the fact that they are putting the time in for the virtual school and not just screwing around on YouTube, or,
Yeah.
you know, desperate to have somebody encourage them in some way or mentor them in some way, because they're not having any of those same opportunities that they did. And a lot of
Mhm.
kids, they rely on some of their self-esteem through their sports or their extracurriculars, none of which are happening.
Yeah.
So, you know, Granges can be amazing, amazing, you know, community resources, and Grangers can be amazing mentors. And so, you know, the things that we're talking about, just think about Grange in a way of, you know, how to meet the needs that are out there.
Mhm.
Doesn't have to be in any particular way that is so earth-shattering, because it's like that saying about adopting a dog, you know, for the dog, you know, for you it might just be a dog, but for them it's a whole life or something, a few years
Yeah.
and whole
Yeah.
life. It's for the kids, you could be making a huge difference.
Yeah.
For some of your people in your community, you could making a huge difference in their
Yes.
lives
Yeah.
by
Just being there. Just
yeah,
being there sometime. I mean, I'd love to, I wish we had another half an hour, because I'd love to talk about our bookworm program at Valley Grange. You know, because of what the kids are telling us, we're telling us, we haven't been able to do it this year, is they just like being around a Granger. I mean, they read to us, and that's the essence, the short version. They just like being with a Granger. They call us, sometimes they call us bookworms. We call them bookworms. And the teachers have said, you know, that's a significant value, that somebody who's not their teacher, who's not their parent, somebody who just in the community, I was going to use very earthy language, cares about these kids
right.
and is willing to pay attention to them. I always really enjoyed it. In fact, I played with, and I'm still working on, what I'm calling the backwards bookworm, which is me, again, using technology. The kids can't read to me, but I can read to them. And I've got a joke book actually that I want to play with a little bit, and record me reading jokes to them, and then upload that to Valley Grange has a YouTube channel. Well, it's mine actually, but upload it to the YouTube channel and tell the teachers this is available. You know, I mean, there are some challenges with things like this. We have to be very careful about relationships with kids outside of school and so on. Probably a topic for another day. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if we are the fraternal and social organization that we think we are, we should be in high demand right now.
And I mean, that's for the kids. You think about all the ways you could implement this for adults. I think about the, you know, neighbors that we have down the street that have basically been just him and her for 9 months without anybody visiting and stuff like that. You know,
Mhm.
give them a link to the bingo that Pennsylvania State Grange is running. They'd be more than happy to have non-members from not their state coming and seeing, you know, and playing bingo. And then
Mhm.
that's what they've had. I mean, we've had people from California,
Yeah.
Florida, and North Carolina playing every week with them, because it's offering them something to do. And if your Grange can start a bingo and offer it for your community, or anything else, we did trivia nights. I mean, find ways to offer some social opportunity, because you're right. It's not social distancing, it's physical distancing that's taking a toll on our social lives. So
Yeah. So, well, great. Thanks Amanda. Thanks for joining us today. Those of you that are watching or have, well, actually, we're not live, so to speak. And those of you that are now watching, thanks for joining us. I think this has been certainly encouraging and helpful, and hopefully thought-provoking. If you have any ideas for future topics or resources that you'd like us to explore, and provide some information on, just send an email to webmaster@mainstategrange.org, or you can submit it through the website. We're here to help each other. Now, this hasn't exactly been a Grange meeting, but it still seems appropriate to close today's program with this thought. As there is no more work for us today, and we are again to separate, let us not forget the principles of our order. Let us add dignity to labor, and in our dealings with our fellow men, be honest, be just, and fear not. I love that. I love that. Let us be and you got to love this. You really got to love this. Let us be quiet, peaceful citizens. And what are we supposed to do? Feeding the hungry, helping the fatherless and the widows. Admittedly, that's kind of dated language. And keeping ourselves unspotted from the world. I have to just do this quickly. My next Exploring Traditions column is going to be about the Grange salutation, because I don't know that a lot of people realize this. The Grange salutation is explained in the 4th degree ritual. A good patron places faith in God, nurtures hope. The technology isn't exactly working here because the software wants to focus on whoever's speaking. A good patron places faith in God, nurtures hope, dispenses charity, and is noted for fidelity.